Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA stories. In this Reddit video, two fake homeowner association cops just pulled into my driveway with plastic badges and a clipboard, ready to collect HOA dues. Little did they know, I'm the county sheriff and I am about to ruin their entire day. Let's dive right into the story. This happened about 2 years ago, and I still chuckle every time I think about how these people thought they could intimidate a county sheriff with fake badges from a party store. So for context, I'm a county sheriff and been doing the job for over 15 years, and I thought I had seen every kind of ridiculous behavior humans could come up with, but I was wrong. Some background first, my house sits on a corner lot that I bought about 8 years ago. It's a nice place, nothing fancy, but it has a big yard where I can work on my truck and a garage for my woodworking hobby. The neighborhood is quiet, mostly families and retirees, the kind of place where people wave when they drive by and kids still ride bikes in the street. About 5 years after I moved in, a developer bought up a bunch of adjacent farmland and built a subdivision called Hellhole Estates, name obviously changed for privacy reasons. It amounted to pseudo-fancy houses on postage stamp lots, but whatever. The developer created an HOA to manage the new community, complete with all the usual restrictions about lawn height, mailbox colors, Christmas decorations, and so on. Here's the important part though. My property was never part of this HOA. I bought my house years before the subdivision existed, and my deed clearly shows my lot predates their development. The HOA boundaries were drawn around existing properties like mine. I've got everything documented and filed with the county. For the first couple years after Hellhole Estates was built, everything was peaceful. The HOA did their own thing with their members, I did my thing on my property, and we all coexisted just fine. I got along well with most of my new neighbors, helped a few of them with minor car troubles and such, but then the HOA board changed hands. New president, new treasurer, new attitude. These people took the job way too seriously, like they were running a small country instead of managing a suburban neighborhood. They started sending newsletters about maintaining community standards and protecting property values, with increasingly aggressive language about compliance and enforcement. I also started getting letters, not every week, but often enough to be annoying. They actually wanted me to join the HOA voluntarily, claiming it would benefit everyone and help maintain neighborhood cohesion. I just ignored them. I had no interest in paying monthly dues for services I didn't need, especially when I was not legally required to join. The letters got more persistent though. They started referencing specific violations they claimed to see from my property. My grass was supposedly too long, even though I mowed it every week. My truck was apparently an unsightly commercial vehicle that violated their aesthetic standards, even though it was a personal vehicle I used for work. They didn't like that I had a small boat on a trailer in my driveway during fishing season, and I finally wrote them back, politely explaining that I was not a member of their HOA and I had no intention of becoming one. I even included copies of my property survey and deed to make it clear that my lot was outside their jurisdiction. I figured that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. The letters got nastier. They started threatening fines, liens, and legal action. They claimed that all properties in the greater HOA area were subject to HOA authority regardless of membership status. They said that I was setting a dangerous precedent that would encourage other homeowners to ignore community standards. I was getting annoyed, but as a law enforcement officer, I deal with people who don't understand legal boundaries all the time. I figured they would eventually just realize they had no authority over my property and move on to harassing someone else. Then things escalated in a way I never saw coming. It was a Saturday morning in late spring. I was in my garage working on a cabinet for my wife when I heard vehicles pulling into my driveway. Not unusual, neighbors sometimes stop by, delivery drivers, that sort of thing, but when I looked out I saw something that made me do a double take. Two guys in what looked like police uniforms were walking up to my front door. They had utility belts, badges, official-looking shirts with patches, the whole 9 yards. But something was immediately off. The uniforms looked like they came from a Halloween store or something, the badges were obviously fake plastic, and I didn't recognize either of them as actual law enforcement. I walked out to meet them, trying not to laugh. After 15 years as a sheriff, you develop good instincts about situations that are not what they appear to be. Good morning, officers. Can I help you with something? The taller one, a guy in his 40s with a dead serious expression and a clipboard that looked like he had stolen it from a doctor's office, stepped forward. We are with Hellhole Estates HOA Enforcement Patrol. We need to discuss your overdue HOA fees and multiple violation notices. I had to bite my lip to keep from cracking up. These guys were actually pretending to be some kind of official enforcement officers for the HOA. They had fake badges that looked like they came from a party supply store and patches that clearly said HOA Patrol in comic book font and an attitude like they had real authority. I think there's been a misunderstanding here, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm not a member of your HOA. Sir, all residents in this area are subject to HOA regulations and fee obligations. We have authority to collect overdue payments and issue citations for violations. The second guy, shorter and stockier, was taking pictures of my truck with his phone like he was documenting evidence of a major crime. Unlicensed commercial vehicle parked in residential driveway. Clear violation of section 4.2 of the community standards. That's my personal truck, I said, watching him try to look official while fumbling with his phone camera. And again, I'm not part of your HOA. The tall one flipped through pages on his clipboard with exaggerated authority like he was reading from the Constitution. According to our records, you owe $2,400 in overdue fees plus $1,800 in accumulated fines. Payment is due immediately, or we will be forced to initiate lien proceedings. I was genuinely curious about how far they would push this charade. Can I see some identification? He held up a laminated card that looked like it had been made at Kinko's. It had his picture and said Hellhole Estates Enforcement Officer with a seal that was obviously downloaded from the internet. This is not a real law enforcement ID, I pointed out, examining the obviously fake card. We are duly authorized by the Hellhole Estates HOA board to enforce community regulations and collect fees. The tall one replied with complete conviction. We have full authority within the development boundaries. I realized these guys actually believed what they were saying. Someone had convinced them that they were legitimate law enforcement officers with real legal authority. It was like watching kids play cops and robbers, except they were not kids. I need you to leave my property, I said firmly. Sir, we are conducting official business. You're required to cooperate with our investigation and fee collection efforts. The short one stepped closer, puffing out his chest like he was intimidating. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. Your choice. That is when I decided to have some fun with this ridiculous situation. I pulled out my actual badge. I am County Sheriff OP. Those are fake uniforms, fake badges, and fake authority. You're playing dress up and pretending to be law enforcement officers. The look on their faces was absolutely priceless. The tall one's clipboard actually slipped from his hands and scattered papers across my driveway like confetti. The short one's mouth dropped open so wide I thought his fake badge might fall right off his shirt. But we are official HOA enforcement. No, you're civilians in costume playing pretend cop and you just tried to intimidate an actual sheriff with a plastic badge. They looked at each other, then back at me, then at each other again. You could practically see the wheels turning as they realized how badly they had screwed up. We didn't know. Yeah, obviously. Now get off my property before this gets embarrassing for all of us. They scrambled back to their car faster than kids caught stealing cookies, gathering up their scattered papers and tripping over each other in their rush to leave. Their patrol vehicle was a white sedan with magnetic signs on the doors that said HOA Patrol in letters that looked like they'd been made with a home printer. I collected the papers they had dropped and took pictures of everything, including their car and license plate, before they sped away. Then I went inside and did some research on my laptop while having a good laugh about the whole situation. It turns out the HOA had hired a company called Community Standard Solutions to handle their so-called enforcement needs. These were not actual law enforcement officers, they were just door-to-door salesmen in fake uniforms. The company website advertised professional HOA enforcement services with uniformed officers who could provide authoritative presence for fee collection and violation enforcement. The whole operation was designed to make homeowners think they were dealing with real police officers. The uniforms, badges, official language, and these magnetic car signs, it was all intended to intimidate people into compliance through fake authority. And by the way guys, if you enjoyed the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and leave me a comment if you want to support me. Thank you so much. I was annoyed, but more than that, I was amused by the sheer audacity. These people thought they could send fake cops to intimidate a real sheriff into paying HOA dues for an association I was not even part of. Well, that's when I decided to teach everyone involved a lesson about the consequences of playing dress-up cop. First, I called the Community Standard Solutions company directly. I identified myself as the county sheriff and calmly explained that their employees had just tried to intimidate me with fake law enforcement credentials on my own property. The person I spoke with immediately went into panic mode, claiming it was all a misunderstanding and that their officers were clearly identified as HOA enforcement, not police. Your people showed me fake badges and claimed authority to conduct investigations and collect fees, I explained patiently. That is impersonating law enforcement regardless of what their patches say. I could hear papers shuffling frantically in the background as they tried to figure out how much trouble they were in. What do you want us to do? Stop sending fake cops to people's houses, find a new line of work and never operate in my county again. Yes, sir, absolutely, we will shut down operations immediately. Next, I contacted the HOA board president, Mrs. Karen. I requested a meeting to discuss their recent enforcement activities, and she agreed to meet at the community center, probably thinking she could convince the local sheriff to support their efforts, but she had no idea what was coming. I arrived with a folder full of documentation, photos of the fake officers, copies of their fraudulent IDs, and screenshots from the enforcement company's website showing their deceptive practices. Mrs. Karen, your HOA hired people to impersonate law enforcement officers on my property yesterday. She looked confused. They're not impersonating anyone. They are legitimate enforcement officers hired by our management company. No, they are not. They are private citizens in Halloween costumes with fake badges claiming authority they don't possess. I showed her the photos and documentation. Her face went from confused to pale to absolutely mortified as she realized what they had actually done. But the company said they were fully licensed and authorized to handle enforcement. The company lied to you. Your fake cops just tried to intimidate a county sheriff into paying dues for an HOA I'm not even a member of. She started backpedaling so fast I thought she might fall out of her chair. We had no idea they would do something like that. We just wanted to help with compliance issues. Well, now you know what kind of help you hired. Here's what's gonna happen though. I explained that she had exactly 48 hours to do 3 things. Immediately fire the fake enforcement company, send written notice to every homeowner explaining that the uniformed people were not real law enforcement, and publicly acknowledge that my property was not part of their HOA. And if we don't? She asked nervously. Well, then I will make sure every media outlet in the county knows that your HOA hired fake cops to intimidate residents. I will also recommend that all the homeowners who got scammed by your fake officers file complaints with the State Consumer Protection Office. She agreed to everything before I'd finished talking. Community Standard Solutions disappeared overnight, probably realizing they had picked the wrong sheriff to mess with. The company's website went dark, their phone number was disconnected, and the fake officers vanished like they had never existed. The HOA had to send letters to every homeowner explaining what had happened and apologizing for the deception. They also had to acknowledge in writing that several properties, including mine, were not part of the association and had been incorrectly targeted, but the best part was watching the neighborhood drama unfold on social media. The homeowners were furious that their HOA had hired fake cops to intimidate them. The Facebook group exploded with angry posts about being deceived and threatened by people in costume. Mrs. Karen tried to claim it was all the management company's fault, but nobody was buying it. Within 2 weeks, she and half the board had resigned in disgrace. The remaining board members had to hire an actual attorney to clean up the legal mess and find a new management company that didn't employ fake law enforcement. Several neighbors stopped by to thank me for exposing the scam. Turns out the fake officers had been harassing multiple homeowners, including some elderly residents who had been genuinely frightened by people in police uniforms demanding money at their doors. One neighbor brought me a 6-pack of beer and said, "I paid those idiots $50 for a violation that didn't even exist. Thanks for shutting them down." Another told me, "I knew something was off about those guys, but I didn't want to take chances with people who look like cops." The best part is that my corner of the HOA is now completely peaceful. The new HOA board focuses on actual community issues like organizing block parties and maintaining common areas instead of harassing non-members with fake enforcement officers. I still live quietly on my corner lot with my truck in the driveway and my boat on its trailer during fishing season, but best of all, I have not received a single threatening letter about community standards violations. And yeah, sometimes justice comes in the form of exposing fraud and protecting your neighbors. Sometimes it is just the satisfaction of watching bullies realize they picked the wrong target. And the next one is a malicious compliance story which is titled "Treat all prank calls as though they are serious? Sure, have fun making 180 extra large pizzas." So I work in a major pizza delivery chain that has so far been unsuccessful in out-pizzaing the hut. Our store is in a college town and everyone is bored as hell right now for obvious reasons. I think this was posted during COVID, so we've gone from maybe 1 prank call a day to at least 3 to 5, which is not much, but still really annoying with how much more business we have been getting, again for obvious reasons. The worst part is how uncreative and low effort most of them are. At least 80% of them are, "Can I get a boneless pizza?" Or "Is this the Krusty Krab?" With the occasional insert GDA fast food order copy pasta there, this had been going on way too long, so I took up the habit of just hanging up whenever someone starts saying some super stuff. The boss was not too happy about this, but didn't care enough to say anything until an incident when I hung up on someone who wanted that boneless pizza, and he called back pissed because he actually wanted to order. So then I got a stern talking to from the boss man, and he sends a message to the company group chat app saying, "I know we've been getting more prank calls than usual, but please don't follow in certain people's footsteps and just hang up on them. Take the calls as seriously as possible. If they order something we cannot make, calmly explain it to them and offer them something we do actually sell. We want to try to make money off of them, even if they are acting stupid." So the very next call is where the fun starts. "Thank you for calling, what can I get you?" "I'm so hungry, can I get an extra large pizza with triple every topping?" "I'm sorry ma'am, we can only go up to 1 extra and double each topping." Okay then, can I get 20 XLs of each meat you all have? So like 20 pepperoni, 20 sausage, etc. These people are obviously high as hell and giggling in the background the whole time, but I say, sure, give me a second to ring it all up. Okay, so that's 180 pizzas, the total will be $1,000. Don't remember the actual price, but close enough, and it'll take about 3 hours. Awesome, thanks, we will pay with a check when we get there. Dial tone. So I place the order, and not 30 seconds later I hear, "What the actual F?" from the boss, and he runs to the computer. "How are they paying for this?" he asks me, and they said with a check. We do still take checks for orders over $200, right? "They cannot have been serious. Was this a prank call?" "No, sure boss, you said take all calls seriously." He just grumbles and picks up the phone and calls the customer, and all I hear is super loud laughter as he hangs up. Meanwhile, other employees have started actually making the ridiculous order, not noticing anything weird about it. So by the time the boss finishes the call and cancels the order on the computer, there are already 5 XL pepperoni pizzas in the oven, so we got free dinner for everyone working that night, as well as another message in the group chat app simply saying, "In regards to my last message, please just use good judgment when taking orders." And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. It all started back in 2002 when my grandfather Jose passed away. He had lived his whole life on a massive plot of land down in rural Paraguay, way out in the countryside, about an hour away from the nearest town. My grandpa's property covered dozens of acres of beautiful rolling hills, small forests, and even a little stream running through it. It was an absolutely gorgeous and peaceful place, and when Grandpa Jose died, he shockingly left the entire property and everything on it to me in his will. I was only 22 years old at the time and in college up in the United States. I had no idea what to do with all that land down in Paraguay. Part of me thought about trying to sell it, but my grandpa had made me promise to try to hang on to the family land if I could. So I decided to just let it be for the time being and deal with it after I finished university. Well, after graduating, I got a good job up here in the corporate world and life just kept rolling on quickly. Before I knew it, 20 years had passed without me ever revisiting or even really thinking much about that massive plot of land my grandpa had left me down in Paraguay. By the way, I think Americans call it Paraguay and Brits call it Paraguay. I think I'm more British in that regard. Anyway, I had just let it sit completely vacant and untouched for 2 whole decades. Then earlier this year, I got an extremely surprising letter in the mail. It was from some homeowners association calling themselves the Elk Hills Community Association, down in Paraguay near where my family's land was located. They claimed that at some point around 2010, their association had started developing my grandpa's old property into a whole new housing community with over 100 single-family homes. I was completely blindsided and in utter disbelief. How could they possibly do that without my knowledge or approval as the rightful owner of the land? The audacity of it was mind-blowing. This letter stated that they were the legitimate owners of the property now and had been paying the annual property taxes on it for over a decade. Their arrogant letter basically ordered me to stop contesting their ownership and stop harassing them, or else they'd get litigious. You can imagine how angry I was after reading that outrageous letter. I immediately got on the phone and contacted my grandpa's old legal team in Paraguay to look into this homeowner association's claims. And sure enough, the lawyers were able to confirm that somehow around 2010, this Elk Hills Community Association had falsely claimed ownership over the land, gotten it rezoned for housing by lying to the local authorities, and then brazenly started building an entire neighborhood of over 100 homes on my property. Furthermore, apparently quite a bit of corruption and bribing was involved in this whole ordeal too, according to some locals. My blood was absolutely boiling. I could not believe the unmitigated gall and lawlessness of this insane HOA. Clearly their criminal behavior and illegal land grab has been going on for over a decade at this point, but none of that mattered. I was still the rightful owner and they needed to be stopped and held accountable. I hopped on a plane down to Paraguay as soon as I could go to see the property and this rogue neighborhood with my own eyes. When I arrived and saw the scale of the development on my land, I was utterly blown away. It was a whole village of nice little suburban homes crammed together on my grandpa's beautiful open countryside land. There were paved roads, streetlights, kids playing in the streets, the whole 9 yards. Absolutely unbelievable. I immediately identified who appeared to be the leaders of this phony community association and approached them about their illegal occupation of the land. They brushed me off aggressively, insisting that after paying the property taxes for over 10 years, this land was legally theirs under a local so-called homestead law. The disrespect and audacity was just astounding. That is when I met Karen, the clearly deranged president of the Elk Hills Community Association. This woman was a total battle axe and just downright nasty. When I tried explaining to Karen that I was the rightful owner, she started yelling and cursing at me, calling me a liar and a troublemaker right out on the street. It was just nuts. Karen arrogantly told me, "We have lived here for over 10 years and built a wonderful community on this land. We will never let a greedy little worm like you take it from us and our families. Get off our property immediately before I call the police on you for trespassing, you lying piece of trash." I couldn't believe the unhinged attitude and aggressive entitlement from Karen and her cronies. But I stayed calm and simply responded, "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is my property that you have illegally occupied and developed. But don't worry, I will let the courts sort out who the real owners are." And with that, I politely walked away and headed straight to my lawyer's office. The legal battle was on. I got the best law firm in the entire country involved to sue the pants off Karen, the Elk Hills Community Association, and anyone else involved in this insane illegal land grab scheme. The evidence was crystal clear that my grandpa's land had been seized through fraudulent means. And well, we were able to freeze the association's bank accounts and assets during the court process. Meanwhile, the confrontation escalated in some crazy ways back on the property. While the court case played out over a long time, Karen and her crew tried pulling all sorts of shady intimidation tactics to try scaring me off. Strange, threatening notes were left on my car, someone tried breaking into my hotel room at night, and I even found a bag of feces burning on my front doorstep one morning. The craziness just kept escalating from Karen's deranged mob. However, I did not budge an inch. I knew I was in the right and I was not letting these maniacs scare me away. The level of malice and vitriol coming from Karen and her minions was just unreal. Several times when I'd go to video record the construction work being done, expanding their illegal housing development on my property, the workers would actually try to assault me and smash my camera. These people clearly had no fear of authority or the law whatsoever. It was a true menace to society that had been allowed to fester for over a decade. Things finally came to a head about a year into the legal battle. One day, a crew of workers with a small army of thuggish-looking security escorts started showing up bright and early every morning to continue rapidly expanding the illegal housing development on my land, even while the court case was still pending. I knew they were trying to create facts on the ground by rapidly building out even more houses and making their land-seized community even bigger before the court could rule. Well, I was ready for them this time. I got a court order authorizing the police to monitor and control the situation on the property while the trial was still underway. So then when Karen's crew of construction workers and thugs showed up yet again to keep expanding, they were blocked and ousted from the property by the authorities, siding with me as the rightful landowner. This led to some absolutely insane scenes of grown adults throwing tantrums, cursing, and even throwing rocks at the police. The level of self-entitlement and lawlessness was just off the charts. Karen's unhinged antics crossed all kinds of lines, like trying to bribe officials, spinning a wild false narrative in the local media about being victimized by a greedy foreign landowner, and even unfurling a gigantic crude banner from a roof labeling me a racial slur. They were pulling out every stop to try to weaken my resolve and smear me in the eyes of the public. But none of it worked, it just kept strengthening my determination to see them get the book thrown at them in court. And I knew the evidence was overwhelmingly in my favor as the illegitimate property owner. Finally, after years of bitter fighting against an absolute menace to society, I got the ruling I'd been patiently waiting for. The court resoundingly declared me as the legal owner of the land. In a scathing ruling, the judge eviscerated the Elk Hills Community Association as a criminal enterprise founded on lies, fraud, and bribery. The community was ordered to dismantle completely and vacate the land within 90 days or face massive fines and potential jail time for its ringleaders. For Karen and her deranged cabal, the gravy train had finally come to an end. They were ordered to pay me over $7 million in damages for their decade plus of illegally occupying, developing, and profiting from my inherited property. And on top of that, the criminal investigation quickly snowballed to uncover all sorts of other frauds and schemes the community leaders were involved in, from tax evasion to money laundering and even more. In the end, I ended up having to hire a professional crew to come in and completely demolish the entire illegal housing development on my land once the 90-day period was up. It was an extremely expensive and laborious process, tearing down over 100 homes, ripping up paved roads, removing underground utilities and power lines, and trying to restore the land back to its natural state as much as possible. But of course it had to be done. As for Karen and the former ringleaders of the Elk Hills Community Association criminal enterprise, well, they faced severe legal consequences. Karen herself ended up getting sentenced to 5 years in prison for her leadership role in the decade-long fraud scheme, and she also had to pay over $2 million of the $7 million in damages that the court had awarded to me. A handful of Karen's top lieutenants in the corrupt community association were also given jail sentences ranging from 1 to 4 years, in addition to hefty fines they were ordered to pay from any remaining assets they had. The illegal development company they had hired to construct the housing community also got completely dismantled and banned from ever operating in the country again. It was deeply satisfying to see such thorough justice getting served against these lawless people who had behaved with zero regard for property rights or the rule of law. Their dangerous sense of entitlement and criminality had spiraled completely out of control over the years into a full-blown criminal operation built on fraud, intimidation tactics, and even violence against anyone who tried to stop them. Of course, none of this intense legal battle came cheap for me either. All the lawyers, private security teams to protect myself, and the eventual demolition and land restoration costs easily ran into the millions of dollars. But I considered it a worthwhile investment to defend my family's property rights and to take down a nefarious criminal enterprise that had been allowed to metastasize for over a decade. If I had not taken a stand, just imagine how much bigger and more emboldened their lawless operation could have become. In the aftermath, Karen's neighborhood signs and logos were all torn down too. Within some time, it had been completely returned to its natural state, the gorgeous, empty countryside property that my grandpa had loved so dearly and willed to me. It felt like a huge burden had been lifted, and his beloved family land had finally been secured. As for the several hundred homeowners who had been duped into buying homes from the fraudsters, they eventually did receive some compensation from court-ordered victim restitution funds. But many of them were still completely financially devastated by suddenly seeing their homes and life savings disappear after investing in what they had been deceitfully led to believe was a legitimate housing community. And wow, Ripe stars, I gotta say, this story was absolutely insane, and while I feel happy for OP that things turned out the way they did, I also feel kind of bad for at least some of the homeowners because I don't think that all of them were criminals. all of their houses getting torn down, despite them, probably at least some of them, not knowing that the property/land was illegally acquired by Karen and the HOA. Definitely a heartbreaking situation, because I can imagine there are probably some families who lost their entire life savings and now their lives are destroyed. Anyway, there was also a very interesting comment in the comment section and I wanted to read it to you. It goes like this. This story honestly gave me anxiety just reading it because it reminds me of a boundary pushing situation one of my friends is currently trapped in with his neighbors. It's not nearly as extreme as having 100 homes illegally built on your property, thankfully. But there are definitely some concerning parallels in terms of the audacity and entitlement from these neighbors that keeps escalating. So my buddy Greg inherited this modest little ranch-style house in the suburbs from his grandparents a few years back. It's a nice enough place and an okay neighborhood, and well, apparently the family living a few doors down from him have had it out for him ever since he moved in. I'm not sure if it's because Greg is younger, a single guy without kids, while they are an older couple with teenage sons. But these psycho neighbors have just constantly tried claiming his property as their own in the most obnoxious ways. It started out relatively tame at first, like them mowing over the boundaries and cutting his grass without permission, letting their dogs routinely use his yard as a bathroom, or even potting plants and leaving decorations on his side of the property line. Just being totally oblivious to boundaries in that passive-aggressive Karen kind of way, you know. But Greg is a pretty laid-back, live-and-let-live kind of guy, so he would just politely ask them to stop doing those things and respect that it's his property. He tried killing them with kindness basically, and well, that approach definitely stopped working after a while because these people just never let up with pushing every possible boundary. At one point, the dad from the neighbor family legitimately tried telling Greg that a good 15 to 20 feet of his backyard space actually belonged to them because of some BS about an old contractor making a mistake with the property lines years ago. Just a brazen attempt to straight up steal a part of his land. The audacity of these people is just mind-blowing. When Greg showed them the deed and land survey telling them to get lost, they got all huffy and started giving him the cold shoulder anytime they would see him outside. Things just kept escalating over the following year to the point where the neighbors were full on trespassing and even trying to make bogus claims about Greg vandalizing their yard or harassing them somehow. There were so many police calls made by both sides that I think the officers started getting sick of having to go over there and deal with their BS. The situation has unfortunately turned into this ongoing petty turf war that both sides keep trying to one-up the other one. It's seriously like a slice of that HOA madness from the original story playing out in real life. Recently, it got to the point where Greg put up security cameras around his property and installed a big wooden fence just to finally get some privacy and peace from these weirdos. And you won't believe what these nutso neighbors did in response. They started blasting air horns or letting off air raid sirens at like 6 AM every morning to harass Greg. On top of that, they started shining blinding bright spotlights over the fence at all hours of the night. It's like a damn prank war taken to the extreme by these 40-something-year-old adults acting like unhinged toddlers. So yeah, reading that story about the unrelenting harassment and intimidation tactics from the insane homeowner association definitely struck a nerve with me because of the similarities to what my friend has been dealing with. The levels of deranged entitlement, petty vindictiveness and blatant disrespect from crappy neighbors are just wild. Although obviously Greg's situation has not descended into the utter criminality of having an entire neighborhood illegally constructed on his land. I really feel for him having to spend so much time and money installing cameras, fences and alarm systems just to get some basic peace and privacy on property that is rightfully his. He's trying to go through the proper legal channels too by filing complaints and restraining orders against these psycho neighbors. Anyway, it has been an incredibly draining experience for Greg. And the next one is a petty revenge story, which is titled Karen at Work. So we had a true Karen at work. Her name really was Karen and she lived up to the name. She took it upon herself to police all of the other employees in a cubicle and office setting. Heaven forbid that someone used a printer without using double-sided print or printing someone for personal use. She was called the Printer Nazi. Now, our company also had two buildings, corporate office and production office, and the production office is where I worked, and sometimes visitors from the corporate office would use a vacant cubicle and vice versa. Our IT department was normally located at the corporate office to keep them close to upper management, but one day we had IT in our offices using a few of our cubicles while they did some system upgrades. Karen has no clue who these people are, so she takes it upon herself to walk behind them to police their actions. There was one gentleman who happened to be checking the weather, which was allowed by the way for an employee and company safety. We had major storms coming in that day. Karen saw his screen and decided to stop and scold him on the use of the company intranet for pursuits outside of company business. Now here's the kicker. Remember I said she didn't know who this gentleman was? He was the head of IT. He never told her who he was and just played it cool. He came and told me what took place during our next break. As he and I were close work friends, I told him that she was the office Karen and made everyone miserable with her constant tattling and reprimands. But now he decided to get petty revenge. He checked her surfing history, and Karen has her own office, so she was able to do just about anything without getting caught. She had been online shopping nearly every single day for several hours a day. She even left him that day and went to her office and purchased a blouse like the hypocrite that she was. Well, I later found out that he turned her in for misuse of company intranet, and they physically walked her out a week later. Had she minded her own business, they never would have checked her history. Bye bye, Karen. And yeah guys, thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.